Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm your host Maqbool with you at PTV World. Of course, with me are Farrukh, Pitafi and Faisal. In today's show, we're going to be taking a look at the upcoming elections in India and, of course, the kind of political dynamics that have been going on for quite some time now, especially, of course, also the way that we usually see a rise in anti-Muslim and anti-Pakistan rhetoric before the elections. And this is something that has also been talked about in a recent report by Hindutva Watch, a Washington-based group that talks about and looks after the way that the minorities are being treated within India. This is especially important given the fact that a number of areas in which a rise in anti-Muslim rhetoric was reported and more hate speech was reported, they were in fact areas and states where the elections were coming up. And this is important, especially in terms of the correlation between the two and how we have seen in the past as well that as soon as elections are approaching, there is a rise in such statements, there is a rise in hate speech, there is a rise in people inciting violence, and of course eventually we also see more communal riots in the street as well. And of course this is something that is really also discouraging, especially given of course the way that people suffer, of course including minorities such as the Muslim population within India, and also quite shocking and worrisome in terms of the way that the BJP-led government in areas in which they rule also have seen about 80% of the incidents of hate speech happen. And so this is quite concerning in terms of what this means for India and how exactly it's going to affect the political dynamics of the country. At the same time, we're also going to be taking a look at what that means then in terms of the BJP's prospects in the upcoming elections, as well as the alliance of the opposition, which seems to be putting in a strong footing against the BJP, and whether or not the kind of narrative that has always favored the BJP is going to do so again, and whether they're going to be lucky a third time as well. So we're going to be taking a look at the overall dynamics within India and try and understand what is going on there and what seems to be the future of the country, and whether or not anybody is concerned about India's progress and keeping its democratic foothold strong, which seems to be also something that is losing its grip with India no longer being able to confidently declare itself as a democratic secular India. And so this is of course something that will not only impact the entire region and the world, but also India itself as well, and whether or not the population at large are going to be doing something about it. So we're going to be taking a look at this in our segment in the debate, and of course Farrukh and Faisal are going to be with me in the show. We'll also be joined by our guests online. But Faisal, let me start with you in terms of what is going on. Of course, we see a lot of rise in anti-Muslim incidents and rhetoric, and there's a lot of hate speech going on, and that's not, of course, new in terms of what we've seen previously as well. But I want to understand, given the fact that what the report talks about, there seems to be a very direct correlation between areas in which elections are coming up and more incidents of hate speech is happening. And so what does that mean in terms of where India is heading and what sort of impact that is going to have on the community and society at large? Is that something at all that concerns the people of India?
Sana, if we look at obviously, the timeline of BJP's growing, of course we can see that the kind of narratives they have been promoting and utilizing to get on limelight, it will be successful once more, because what we have seen that since BJP has been using the hard line in India's politics, they have always been very successful. And once again, of course, they want Modi to, of course, be once more Prime Minister of their country, and they are bidding on it. The only, once again, the only narrative they are left with, that is of course anti-Muslim and then anti-minorities, because if we overall look at India's society today, society is so corrupted in terms of morality that anyone who is other than the upper class Hindus, of course they are suffering in today's India. And we know that RSS, Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, is the ideology of today's India and the Nazi ideology of obviously this century. and it is at its full swing. If we talk about Pakistan as a country, India has always been using slurs against, especially when an election nears. And of course, if election is going to be next year, early next year, or a bit later than early next year, still they would be utilizing Pakistan, anti-Pakistan slurs as their slogans, because it sells really good in India. And Muslims, of course, there have been so many incidents that have taken place this year, last year, against the Muslims, and that was a sort of momentum they wanted to gain, and they already gained. Of course, we know whatever happened in Haryana. Of course, we know whatever happened in UP. It seems as if anti-Islam and anti-Pakistan sells really good in India. And now, when we see, of course, the elections of next year coming up, there is another thing that is quite selling in today's India, and that is obviously they are declaring all of these Sikh that are living across the globe in mainly in the Western world. They are trying to portray as if they are a terrorist bunch, and that is why they left India. And now whatever the activities are being carried out against them, against their leaders, they are being of course portrayed as if they were the terrorist, and the justice is being carried out. And if we look at a few of the very prominent analysts coming from India, they are constantly highlighting the facts that and they have been doing it since more than 2 years, that whoever has been involved in this movement of Khalistan, and of course they were quite bothered about Khalistan referendum which was taking place, we know, in Australia, in UK, in Canada, in America. They have been very active since quite a few years now, and this was quite bothering for India. And of course they would go to any length to against them, and that too is selling back home. And all of this fuss, of course, it is going to help BJP, and it is going to get a backing once more from RSS, and of course they will be doing fine in the elections.
Okay, let me also welcome in the debate, we've been joined by Brigadier Mr. Raashid Wali Janjua, Director Research, IPRI, and former Ambassador Mr. Baluch. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being part of the discussion. Let me start with you, Ambassador Saab. What Faisal is, of course, pointing towards is something that is quite concerning, especially in the way that the direction the country seems to be taking in. But I want to know whether or not, given especially, of course, how certain communities are not as welcome, including, of course, Muslims, including minorities within the caste system in India, including Sikhs, of course, and including Christians as well. This is something that is very concerning in terms of the entire population and their participation in the electoral process, and whether or not that their concerns are the concerns of the state and the different political parties. I want to then understand, given the situation at the moment and where the BJP stands now, it seems that they're going out on this big outreach and trying to make sure that they connect with whatever voter base they may have. Are they also going to be moving towards any sort of option where they will be looking at inclusion, or will the exclusion, in fact, of these minorities will be something that they'll try to get the vote in their favor?
Sana, we have to look at India of today. It's not India anymore. What BJP is now categorizing it and naming it, it's Bharat. It's the Bharat that is the vision of RSS. It's the vision of BJP and Modi's government. And that Bharat is an exclusive society. It's no more an inclusive India that was being romanticized in the West before India took this fateful turn in its the way they want to constitute their society. So I see it more as a social issue within South Asia, one. Second, this extremist policy and their attempt to go and even kill those descendants on the territory of other countries is internationalizing the Hindutva, internationalizing the state terrorism all over the world. So I think the world has to look at Bharat differently. We have to look at Bharat differently. And of course, we as being the neighbors have immediate implications. One, because of our own security. Two, that there are 230, 240 million Muslims still in India. What will happen to them? Will they be again turned into a new apartheid government? This is what exactly India is doing at this time. BJP government is going to turn India into an apartheid system, where in fact their Aadhaar card, their other measures which were taken in all India, where they were like state policies to discriminate against minorities, to count them differently. So I think we are looking at a new apartheid structure of governance being built. Whether it is tenable or not, whether the world really accepts this, that is the challenge. And I think Pakistan has this responsibility to really call out that if it is wrong, it is wrong. I don't think we should be mincing our words. We should be convincing our friends. We should be telling the media. We should be telling the intelligentsia, and show that, unfortunately, we wouldn't like to use this word, but that ugly face which these extremists want to give it to India. Imagine India just after partition, like India shining, Taj Mahal, old Mughal Empire, and so on and so forth. That all has been demolished, and a new Hindu Rashtra, as they call it, is being built on the ruins of Ram Mandir, the mosque in Gujarat, the houses burnt of the Muslims, the carnage of Christians in Manipur. So I think there is a whole lot of a kind of ethnic cleansing actually happening. We are talking of Serbia. India has really become that country now, where the Sikhs, the Muslims, the Christians, and untouchables are not the equal humans. In fact, one of their intellectuals now is no more. He, in an interview, said it in press that when he was asked that are not the citizens of India equal, he said the equality is among the equals. So he even went ahead and said it that other than the Hindus, all other communities, all other races, all other religions living in India are not equal citizens at all. One. Yeah. Second, I think we have to fight an intellectual war. That is, Bharat, what they're saying now, Hindu as their religion, is not what Hindu concept of Hindu Samaj is. That was different. They have converted, and they have actually usurped that idea of a Hindu, which was not extremist, which was not racist, which actually lived among Muslims, which lived amicably with the rest of the society. So I think this is something racist. This is something which is perverted. But my view as an analyst, is that it is not tenable. Even if they have this victory in the coming elections in 2024, which again seems to me difficult. Let's not give them victory before they really win it. There is a groundswell within India. Those people who believe in a secular, it may be very shrill voice, but there are voices I can hear that no, they don't want this India. This was a different India that is a large segment of intellectuals they want.
Absolutely. And Ambassador Saab, I understand that, but of course we hope that those voices, of course, find their more, and we're able to see that change. But Janjua Sahab, if we look at the current situation, of course, the BJP seems quite confident about their victory, and of course, they're going to be moving ahead with the campaign as they deem fit, and a lot of that, of course, involves this kind of rhetoric. We've seen anti-Muslim, anti-Pakistan, and hate speeches is something that perhaps they thrive on, and there is, of course, the ideology that is put forward to attract a lot of voter base. How much do you think that this is something that is still what the people of India will be voting for, and that's something that the BJP can still bank upon? I understand that they might still, of course, secure this victory, but I want to also know how the general population is then looking at the kind of concerns that Ambassador Saab was raising and the way that different minorities are being treated. Has that not impacted the BJP's voter base that did in fact, or does in fact, believe in the Hududwa ideology, or are they still, you think, largely sticking to that same sentiment and will be looking forward to the BJP coming back to power?
Well, answer to this question is that the electorate is still fragmented in India, because unfortunately the 26-party alliance that is supposed to mount a credible challenge to Indian BJP hegemony is still not very effectively united. And we see very clearly that this alliance, which is called by the onomatopoeic name of India, has so rattled BJP that they are pulling all stops to resort to all kinds of acts to defame them. We saw one of the members of Lok Sabha. He was being bullied on the floor of the parliament by one of the BJP members. A member that belonged to Bahujan Samaj Party. He was a Muslim, and he was treated in such a shameful manner that Congress took notice, and that is being portrayed as a clear sign of how India and BJP is trying its very best to marginalize all vestiges of opposition to its political rise again in 2024. The ground situation is that out of the last 7 states elections, in 4, BJP has lost the elections, and they are obviously, for the right reasons, visibly rattled. There is opposition mounting from the Sikhs, from Punjab, from fringe parties like Bahujan Samaj Party, Samajwadi Party, Congress parties, and if they mount a united political front and in the coalition politics in specific states, those the swing voters, they are swung the side of Congress and its alliance, which is called India. There are chances that BJP could be outpointed in the next elections. But if we see the landscape, this entire country is still in the grip of a communal madness. Modi is building a temple on the ruins of Babri Mosque and is supposed to inaugurate it in May. And before that, it is also expected that the false flag operation would be mounted to ratchet up the tensions and gather the sympathy of the electorate. India, why it is being done? I think it is the centuries-old persecution complex which has been morphed very intelligently by a party that thrives on xenophobia, misanthropy, and political exclusivism. Kashmir has been illegally annexed. There are demographic changes afoot there. Out assembly seats which are being redemarcated. Jammu has got the lion's share. Kashmir has got very less. The objective is to bring about a BJP chief minister who should give some kind of validation to this process of annexation, which effectively de facto position is, and they are trying to make it more de jure through Indian Supreme Court as well. And we see that this Khalistan upsurge is been brought into the spotlight due to the murder of a Sikh activist on Canadian soil and was a Canadian citizen. This has, exposed the Potemkin unreality of India's actual face. India tried to portray to the rest of the world during G20 that it was a country that was a cradle of democracy, and it was a country that is amongst the best in the world and doing better on most of the human resource indices. But the fact was that 150,000 people who were poor, they were effectively erased and they were depopulated, taken out of the Delhi, and they lost their livelihoods during those 2 days of extravaganza, that G20. But the Indian moment in the sun has been clouded by this killing of Canadian Sikh, and the entire world is now excoriating India, and for the right reasons.
Right. Farrukh, when we talk about incidents such as what Janjua Saab was referring to, we often say that this was exposed. It's India's reality and the world has seen it, and that may have been so over the years that there is at least some sort of or a certain level of realization that this is not okay, and what's happening in India, of course, needs some sort of consequence. But do you think that that sort of exposure of India's reality is something that does have an impact again in the way that we see India being run internally as well, in the way that people look at their government, at the different political parties and what's happening, and whether or not these exposures, which might bring to a certain level some sort of debate in the international community, bring the similar level of concern and debate within India, so much so that they will become any sort of obstacle in the general elections. For example, what happened in Canada, will that ever be a problem for the BJP in the upcoming elections?
Right, Sana, thank you very much for the opportunity. I was listening to other guests and Faisal. So I thought that there are many things which have been said, which are established by the way already. For example, Faisal has actually spoken about how BJP actually exploits hate and events which might be fake or which actually lead to more hate for winning the election. Just Google my article on BJP's shock and awe doctrine, right? And you will see that I have actually curated the entire career of BJP using all such means. Similarly, Ambassador Saab spoke about apartheid state, and Brigadier Saab was also referring to the same kind of mistreatment of minorities. So, I mean, it is already in the books. For example, M.S. Golbalkar, who was the second head of RSS, he has written a book called We or Our Nation Explained. And in that book, if I'm not mistaken, it is page 80 or 84, somewhere around there, where he says that what Hitler did in Germany is a good example for us, and that if you want to don't want to convert to Hinduism, then you will have to be second-rate citizens, and you will never be given rights. So these things are already established. What actually intrigues me, Sana, is the flatness of Indian mind. How quickly entirety of India, for example, President Obama in his promised land actually has mentioned this, that when it comes to Pakistan, the entirety of India becomes one, and they don't seem to have that kind of depth left, right? The same kind of jingoism. So I keep on asking myself, inquiring what exactly might have actually caused this. First thing that you have to actually look at is the cowardice, of India's opposition parties and the cowardice of India's intellectual class. The way they actually, and I think that again, Advani had used a great language for this kind of attitude in his book, but he was referring to Indira Gandhi's emergency. It applies today as well. He said that the press was asked to bend, they chose to crawl. So these people keep on crawling, right? So just look at how Indian opposition went mum when it came to Pulwama, when it came to Article 370, or now when you talk about this Canada, India imbroglio, even there they are also totally lost any kind of volition. There are certain good examples. For example, Mamata Banerjee is one shining exception to this rule, because her party is not actively inventing soft Hindutva. Because Congress party has invented this whole thing, they don't have any legs to stand on. But then there is another very interesting thing that you have to look at. India has this intelligence, Hindutva intelligence industrial complex. India's intelligence agencies have been hardened, and they are, by the way, once again being blamed for the assassination of the Sikh gentleman, right? So this intelligence agencies or community was appealed to by Ajit Doval in 2014 at the start of the election, and at that time he pitched that if we are given 10 years, we are going to change the entirety or the fate of the country. So they have been doing this exactly. The problem is that India is going through what I call a hostage situation. The world keeps on tolerating what India does to its own minorities, its own people, because they think that they will be further harmed and they will have no lever to control whatever is happening on ground if India is so provoked. So they keep on tolerating it, but we saw Donald Trump coming to New Delhi.
Right.
At that time there was bloodshed and there was massacre of Muslims, but that did not ring a bell, right? So right now what is happening is this hostage situation is being expanded to other countries. That if you are going to actually work with India, not only tolerate our abuse of our own people, but also the expatriates who are now your citizens.
Right.
So here is what is wrong with the whole situation. But one more thing, Sana. Elite capture. India has this elite capture because Brahmins or upper caste Hindus are only 5% of the country. Who is the rest? Majority the lower castes. Because most of them live in the rural sides or disadvantaged places, they are never given a voice. So the elite is always worried about this idea that somehow caste will be identified as a marker. Very quickly, Sana, I have waited a lot. Just one sentence. Now what they do is they use Muslims or Sikhs or Christians as the straw man to actually unite the Hindus, so that they can, hence the Romeo, talk about Romeos, or for that matter love jihad, that there is going to be this incubus who is going to steal your daughters if you don't hate Muslims, and that's why you have to be united as Hindus. So with that kind of situation, it is called Hindu consolidation. For now, I don't see any correction. But the only two good things about the current crisis is, one, because of that, India's focus has shifted to other countries. We saw Budgram operation was cancelled.
Right.
Similarly, their attitude towards Pakistan might improve in coming days, because you cannot fight with the entire world simultaneously.
Right. Ambassador Saab, earlier you were talking about, of course, the way that we look at the different situation, and I want to understand then what is going to be that point where different countries are going to have a notice of the impact of what is going on within India. When will that overflow? Will we have to wait for incidents like such as that has happened in Canada, or will there be this realization before that?
See, this incident in Canada, India is trying to take it very lightly, or at least in public, they want to appear strong. In fact, if you look at the language and the body language of Canada, which is actually a aggrieved party, they are much more civil in their demeanor, the way, the choice of words of the Prime Minister of Canada, and look at the reaction of Indians. Immediately they stopped the visa issuance of the Canadian nationals, thereby further alienating and in fact traumatizing the Sikh community, because they are in big number. One. Second, in fact, there are suggestions that perhaps India would expel some Canadian diplomats, because according to some reports, India has about 35 diplomatic staff in Toronto, while in Ottawa, while it has, or both I suppose, but and as compared to Canada, which obviously has to process so many visas for the Indians, because at this point of time, Indians make the maximum number of immigrants to Canada. So they have more. So now there are like calls within the Indian system to reduce that. As far as the reaction of other countries is concerned, I think the Five Eyes, that is those important countries, English-speaking countries, that is US, Britain, Australia, and New Zealand, they have made it very clear. In fact, the US has said it that we stand with Canada, and I think in Pakistan should also raise voice that the world must demand answer from India. They must explain the murder, and if it is by a government functionary, it must be brought to the book. And
All
if
right.
the train goes...
All right, Ambassador Saab, we're short on time, so let me just quickly go to Janjua Saab as well. Janjua Saab, you mentioned a false flag operation. Has India not learned their lesson back in 2019? And do you think that if not, then the risk will still be worth it in terms of whatever potential benefit they think they'll likely gain in the upcoming elections?
Well, I think elections, in my judgment...
Right. Let me just take Janjua Saab's perspective, Ambassador Saab. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead, please.
Yeah, the risk for elections, could you repeat the question quickly?
Janjua Saab, you talked about the false flag operation. I want to know whether or not India has learned that lesson in 2019. And if not, do you think that the risk will be worth the benefit that they think they'll gain in the upcoming elections?
Yes, I think India learned its lesson, but whether they are reasonable enough to heed to that lesson is another story. I don't think so. They have heeded that lesson. Their bravado and their defiance of international norms, and now the extrajudicial killings of foreign nationals. It all betokens a mindset that is still steeped in medieval thinking, and their RSS ideology has blinded them to reason. There is a clear and present danger to any false flag operation, and if they didn't learn a lesson during Pulwama, that the drubbing that they took as a consequence of their incursion, I think no amount of persuasion can compel them. The only antidote is a strong preparedness and strong advocacy on our part at all international forums to sensitize the world that what kind of communal madness India is in grip of. And we can see that the Ram Mandir, as the its inauguration approaches, there would be again a danger that any attack could be launched on that ceremony, right, combined with something on LOC or something across the international border to and again gain those sympathies that they badly need. This time that a very clear challenge is being mounted by a credible opposition of 26 parties led by Raashid.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much, Brigadier Janjua Saab, for joining us, and thank you, Ambassador J.R. Baluch, for being a part of the debate. Thank you, Faisal and Farrukh, for also being part of the discussion. Of course, much remains to be seen whether or not sanity will prevail in India, but we of course hope that is the case. It's not only in the benefit of India itself, but of course the entire world, and so that is what we would like to see. But whether or not that happens, of course, is still a question mark. That's all that we have from the debate. See you tomorrow.